for the very first beginning, Cheda, how would you describe yourself? With which adjectives? What really defines you the most?
What defines me the most? Yeah, I'm a man, first of all, and I'm a father. I'm a husband, and I'm a therapist. So these would be my main adjectives or descriptions. I'm a lover of life. I love nature. I love mystery. I love exploration. I love adventure.
And you are also a farmer, is it correct?
It's true. Yeah, I'm a farmer. Yeah, I have a olive and I actually just planted a few weeks ago 800 almond trees as well. So I'm going to be harvesting almonds, and I'm planting vineyard as well. So yeah.
Okay, but this podcast won't be about your farm. It will be about your work, about TRE and your advanced trainings. Before we go to that, if you just can shortly explain your life story, which led you to a mission to help people with touch, with words, with your work that you do.
So I was born in Serbia, in Belgrade, and when I was 20, I went to the UK, and yeah. So my journey from Serbian background, in my family of origin, I do have a lot of trauma. So there is this Balkan field, traumatic field. For a number of centuries and probably even more. And so I have in my family of origin a lot of murders and challenges and things like that. So yeah, growing up was challenging in Belgrade. Then later on, when I moved to London, that was very challenging as well. So I can say my life wasn't as easy or relaxed, and it was, yeah. I lived and survived many challenges. Then there was a war in ex-Yugoslavia as well, and I was in some roles in there as well at the time, 95, and I was married in the UK, and it was very traumatic as well. And so there were a number of kind of steps, events that define who I am. And at the time, I had struggled, having difficulties understanding why, I have such a hard life, let's say. But in time, when I engaged with understanding why certain things happened in my life and why I potentially chose certain things, I realized the richness that I developed and capacity to be a man that I am today, and multi-dimensional capacities that I have to be in life. And that really spilled into my therapy work, which started in 94. There was a time when certain events happened, some other deaths happened in my family of origin, and that, like any death, any birth and death, they're transformational in life. After any birth that happens around you, you are never the same, and you know that. And after every death, also, you're never the same. So some of us can use that to improve ourselves and help our own evolution. Others don't have that capacity or don't have resources. So I managed to to start in '94 my journey of working on myself and studying therapy, and I never stopped. So that's kind of a last 30 years I've been in this field of complementary medicine and working with people and on myself.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that we talk in English and your background is from Serbia? Isn't that strange?
Yes. Yeah.
If you could, yeah.
Slovenian dialect. I can understand some Slovenian dialect, but not so clearly, so it's easier for me. And also somehow English became my most dominant language as well, although I do speak Serbian and Italian, but yeah, so it's probably easiest for me to communicate in English, but it is potentially strange. I agree.
Yeah. You said that your journey started 30 years ago. You
Therapeutic,
30 years.
therapeutic journey.
Yeah, therapeutic journey. Is it right that it's connected with your with the death of your grandma? If
Yeah.
I remember correctly, you mentioned that on the podcast I listened. But maybe for our audience, who are your role models in the field of trauma and in the field of your therapeutic journey? I assume Berseli, Levin, Gabor Mate, we know those people, but who else? And could you list some professional books, links to read, so the people who are interested in this field could read and look for it?
So yeah, you mentioned my grandmother. So probably she's one of the main role models for me as a trauma survivor. Yeah, she survived unbelievable traumatic events, really. And I think a lot of women who lived through and managed to bring society forward, as many men died in the wars and conflicts and so on. Actually, women had the power to carry on the children and carry on the lineage and so on in many cases. And I like to honor that as well. So as far as teachers specifically, Alan Fogel is one of the guys that I really rate highly, and Dan Siegel. Yeah, obviously Gabor Mate. I studied with him, with Bessel van der Kolk, with Porges. Who else comes to mind? Currently, I'm studying with Robert Melillo, who is not necessarily trauma therapist. He's a brain specialist. He's this professor, genius in brain science, but he's really helping me now understand different patterns in brain regions that are involved in the formation of our body responses. That includes trauma and how trauma affects some of these things. So I actually have developed one of the courses based on some of his work and some of my experiences, but you'll see in the future I'm going to open the brain science to more of a trauma field, because it's overly complicated and it can be simplified, and in my view, so I'll give it a go. So yeah, these are the let's say main people that come to mind now.
So if I understand correctly, you don't read just their books, but you really work with them, with Porges, with Berselli. You work with them live.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm a very practical guy. That's what life taught me. Theory is good. I'm not necessarily academic. I don't have a professorship and PhDs, but I have, I think, few PhDs in the life experience in science. So, and that's what I offer in my clinical work. And I do like reading and studying and so on, but to me, has to be applied practically. So I read books of Gabor Mate, then I went and studied with him. Same with Bessel van der Kolk, same with Porges. Same with Melillo, same with Vogel. I haven't actually studied directly, but I kind of listened to some of his work and then applied and so on. So yes, I tend to whatever I engage in, my interest the interest I have in any particular subject. I like to meet people and learn from them directly.
Okay.
I learned, and I had some amazing teachers in my craniosacral work in anatomy, and some of these people were incredibly. They had incredible minds, and they were incredibly equipped with the knowledge, and they can deliver really amazing content of academic knowledge. However, I found with some of them in their personal life, that knowledge did not necessarily apply it, and some of them struggled, like most of us struggle with our own life stories and traumas and so on. And so I learned to really understand that some people, they use the cognitive part very well, but they don't apply it so well. And my desire is actually anything that I learn, I like to apply in my life. And I don't want to study things that I can't apply in my life. So maybe I'm limiting parts of my life and experience, but anything I engaged in, I really like to apply practically. I hope this makes sense.
Yeah, the same. You have your own role of models, and you learn and study with them live. Slovenian TRE providers had the opportunity to meet you live back in 2020. I think you had an advanced TRE workshop about psoas pelvis and diaphragm. You remember? I had an opportunity also to meet you, and back then I experienced a big relief in my stuck diaphragm for the very first time. Thank you again. But could you tell us more about your work with diaphragm? In a Red Bird Embodiment podcast, you also mentioned that you had your own issues with your own diaphragm. And as you described it, it was pretty much the same case as mine. Do all human bodies react the same? That pulling upper body, and all human bodies are the same on the trauma as mine body was pulling that up. You said that 50% people have the same response, and if we TRE providers can work with diaphragm, we can help 50% of our clients. And finally, back then, I really felt a big relief, and also that thought that this part of my body is now fixed. And you said, no, Spila, it's just a beginning, and that there is still a lot to be done. If we can go back then, what happened? And I know it's a lot of questions, but I know you will answer it. Great.
Okay. So I studied anatomy. I studied human body for decades. I still am studying, and since I went into the trauma field and exploring, different parts of the body responses, the main focus was in trauma field. The main focus was psoas. So, or particularly in TRE world, and because psoas helps the whole body contract or responds to any influence that might happen in your life. What I found through my own personal experience and exploration, that my diaphragm was strongly responding to different stimuli. But initially it wasn't moving at all. My diaphragm was totally blocked and really defensive and so on. And then once it started to open, it never stopped really. However, the intensity of the experience, it's very different. So the softness and capacity And elasticity of my diaphragm is very different. My breath is very different. My digestive tract is very different. So many other things actually are different in response to a relaxation of the diaphragm. But I studied and applied and explored how the diaphragm, why is it so important? And I found it's really one of the most important parts of the body. And I bring it in simple terms that if you can do a transplant of the heart or of the kidneys or some other organs, but you cannot do the transplant of the diaphragm. That's how complex the diaphragm is. So that to me really says a lot. So, as I said, every breath you take, every move you make will engage your diaphragm. Whatever you do, you have to engage the diaphragm. And there are particular nerves and the parts of the phrenic nerve, bidirectional nerves like vagus and phrenic nerve that regulate the diaphragm movement and function. So in case one is damaged, the other one will take over and so on. So there is a deeper science to that. However, also diaphragm is connected, with the vagus nerve, with the psoas, with particular nuclei in the brain stem. And some of these structures regulate how we move, how we live, how we behave in life. So therefore, I really see strongly how diaphragm it's the key point. If you learn how to work with the diaphragm, you really will, as I said, at least 50% of all of your work will improve, and you'll have great results with that. In regards to your diaphragm, what I remember, there was a strong reaction, and you are a powerful woman, and some of your patterns were defensive, and quite rightly, because the diaphragm also, and the particular fascia in our body, it has a role of defense. So if someone is invading you, you will functionally and structurally be defensive. So in order for this to change, you need to meet someone in a softer way. And you need to meet the tissue in a softer way. But sometimes you need combination of holding safety, strength, and softness. And somehow over the years, I developed that skill where I can hold people quite strongly and tightly and give them the sense of protection and care and love and therapeutic neutrality, so they can actually, I can actually relax here. This guy doesn't want anything from me necessarily. It's holding me. I probably never felt this in my life, because most of us want something from others. So if someone touches you in any way, they want something from you. They want to say hi. They want to, I don't know, something from you, some form of exchange. While in the therapeutic setting that we develop, and the way I teach, is that already there is an exchange, either financially or verbal exchange, that we're going to be communicating. So that's already giving safe space for us to go deeper into the work. So once your body or part of the brain understands that, then it's easier to sink into the sense of safety and transformation. It's not always easy, because often being held intimately or feeling different emotions that are accumulated in the diaphragm will trigger particular response, will trigger particular emotions and sensations, and you might get confused, and therefore the skill of a practitioner is to facilitate that opening and transformation and deeper work. So that's what happened with you, and so we'll see next time.
Let's talk a little bit about this session. Well, I had an interesting experience because you used a lot of concrete touch. You basically laid on me to help resolve my never-ending fight and flight. would you do the same interventions again? Or yeah.
No, not necessarily. I mean, I did try prior to that, prior to lying and holding you, containing you. It was more of a kind of strong containment position. If you remember, I always start very gently from the periphery with the soft contact, with the self-touch, with the touching together, touching the hand and touching different parts of the body. But engaging with you at the time, your response was strong response. And, so that has no effect necessarily, or at least was preparing your system for some deeper contact, let's say. For other people, that's enough. You don't need to necessarily have a strong containment response, because you would doing the somersaults, your whole body was jumping, and it was quite a very, very strong reaction. And in some of these reactions, what I learned over time, because I have done many courses and I studied with many teachers and many techniques, and some of the cathartic techniques are very useful where people really express a lot. And this is really useful for people who never expressed anything. But what I found that people, they become addicted, they get seduced with expressing things. And then they start to express, any kind of emotion. And what I found that by expressing or overly expressing some emotions, you're not allowing yourself to feel those very emotions. So that's the difference. Because sometimes emotions might be too strong for you just to be with it. How do I feel? Is it anger, rage, pain, anything really? But if I'm just, I'm angry, I'm like screaming out, or I'm crying, or all of that, it's very valuable if you haven't done this. But if you've done that before, then you keep repeating that pattern. And I'll learn from Melillo, for example, why that happens. And this is related to a particular brain structure that I didn't know about. However, once you actually hold on, let's just contain that movement. You've done that 100 times. Let's try something different. Let's try to feel this. It might be uncomfortable. It might not be, you might not feel really great or really happy doing that, but let's try it. And that's where this is where I offer the transformation. And often once you start feeling, and then you can go deeper into your own process.
Yeah, and back that time it happened, you said a lot of anger and movement and all of things, and you had to hold me really, really strong. So I couldn't flight out of my emotion, because inner there was a lot of sadness. And afterwards I could felt, tears. It was interesting for me, and it has been 4 years, and I feel that usually I was really angry and was screaming and was loud, and now when something happens, I see, tears are coming. It's softer, and I understand that now. But just one question about that session. Well, because you knew what to do with me, because you were the first man who was in this therapeutic way safe, and you held me, and you were my rescuer. I felt as in love. You remember, I had problems with that. What was that? Oh, maybe this is the man who's in love with me, or I'm in love with him. Now, when I think about that time, I see clearly what it was all about. But back then, I had this problem. Okay, what to do with all those feelings I felt for the person who took care of me, and and helped me go through the process. Can you please explain? Because I think I'm not the only person who feels like that after such a big and deep process. What really happened?
Okay, so let me just track one step back to complete the previous segment, and then it will lead to answering this question.
Yeah.
So your original response was this anger. As a matter of fact, what I remember, there was frustration there. There was this annoyance and frustration. That was kind of one of the first kind of activating responses for you. And then it went into anger. But you were stuck in that field for a long time. So once you were held and allowed to go deeper, then that sadness came, and kind of a deeper sense of not even despair, but it was quite strong. You were immobilized in a sense. That's what I remember. I don't remember words very well, but I remember contact and this. So I needed you to feel that sense of despair and immobilization and not knowing. And then underneath, you went even deeper. It was the sense of peace, because you allowed, completed that process. So it's a very powerful step. And when I hear people go for a weekend to become masters and to release all of their life, and I'm like, honestly, it just really takes time. And as you said, 4 years later, still the process going. For me, 30 years later, I'm going through different processes. So, and I don't see that as a negative. Actually, it's respectful to our body's original behavior and responses, because it protected us. So when you go to this deep range of experience, you will clearly, because you never experienced that before with anyone, your sense of closeness with that person will be very strong. It's normal. And obviously, we call that transference or counter transference and so on. And it's a big part of our therapeutic process. And it is normal. What's important that I held neutrality there. Just being neutral and allowing you, not shutting you down. Now you should not feel that, because how can I say what you should feel or shouldn't feel? So I think it's process, but I always guided you towards your husband. I always was, joking and, encouraging you to engage a little deeper and more adventurous with your husband, and you did, and so on. But also becomes the limit, because I cannot take responsibilities also for what you feel. You have to deal with it. I can be neutral and not engage in this reciprocal play, and sometimes they can be challenging as well. Sometimes teacher can feel attraction towards a student as well. I think it's or a therapist towards the client, and vice versa. I think that's normal. We all have some kind of points of contact or of deeper recognition of some level. But it's important really to put that in a perspective and kind of work with that. Sometimes they can be voiced, and I think it's really important to voice and say, okay, this is happening for me. What do you think about that? What do you feel about that? And so on. With some people, that might be challenging. They might not be ready actually to discuss some of these things. And that happened with me, where people, had a very strong reaction and they never came back. As a matter of fact, they sent me letters and they or emails misinterpreting and feeling really uncomfortable for what they felt. So, over the years, I became more senior trainer and a teacher. You kind of, you embrace people and let them be what they are, but I can't take responsibilities for your actions. I can try to hold space for you, but there is a limit as well to that. So just to kind of complete with that it is a normal response, and I do encourage that to be explored as well on your own and with other therapists as well. And that's what the richness of the of the experience gives you, because it's not just, oh, you know, my sadness, my emotion. The complexity of your life experience are replaying and repatterning in a different way. And for some of us who had particular challenges or abusive relationships in some way or the other, we might try to repeat patterns again, try to fall back into the old pattern. But then that's why it's important to have neutrality and just hold space and allow new patterning and new behaviors to emerge and to form.
One more question about importance of touch. Some trainers or providers, theory providers could say that touch for them is too dangerous, or they don't use touch. What do you feel if you feel that you are too much involved in the process with touch? Is this something you can explain and talk about?
Of course, you know, specifically with theory, with a number of other therapies and disciplines, you should not use touch. And there are therapies strictly that you don't use touch. And in theory, especially on the first session, or depends on the client, some clients really don't want to be touched, and you never insist, and you negotiate this. You talk to the people, you feel what you need to do. But I do believe we should be equipped to touch in this setting, because in theory you might work, or in any trauma context, you might work with very deep, original movements and sensations that really require touch. And the client might not be aware of that, and you might not be aware of that, but after all these decades in the field, I'm almost certain that at some point, you need to engage with touch. And reason for that is that touch, in my opinion, it's the first sense. Yeah, not the olfactory that was the first cranial nerve that developed and so on. But you were in your mother's womb, enveloped. You were touched all the time. That's how you actually developed. So all the connections from your external environment really helped you develop into functional fetus and baby later on. And as baby, you develop by also being touched and held. That's what the stimuli is. And in all traditions, really, if you look at ancient traditions, people always touched and hugged each other, and it's really, when you hurt yourself, what do? You put the hand on the part of the body that you hurt yourself. You don't think, oh, maybe I should touch myself. Oh, is it going to be dangerous or not? You simply apply that. So I just go back to the really structure, functionality, and the blueprint that we all have. However, the touch in therapeutic setting needs to be developed. So that's for sure, and that's where the skill comes from, and some of the advanced courses that I teach and other people, because in case someone comes to you for a session, for example, and they go through particular process and they really need to be touched, so they ask you, can you put your hand on, I don't know, part of my body, and you say, no, I don't touch, you will squash. There would be a terrible result of that session. So, that's just a simple example. But imagine if someone is asking you for something and you refuse them. So there would be a re-traumatization on another level. Someone is being open to finally engage with something, and you are negating them. That's quite. So you can obviously use the verbal thing and use the self-touch and a number of other things, but I do believe we should be equipped to touch people.
But if you feel you're too much involved, what do you do?
Oh, you negotiate there. You don't. I mean, you always, every touch, every time I try to, engage with touch and so on, I negotiate that. You always come from a neutral place. You always ask for the permission. You always verify then, is this okay for you? Do you need more pressure, less pressure? Where would you like me to put my hand or contact or with you and so on? So always empowering client. And if that feels too much, you always step back. You can, can either voice this, maybe this is too much for you, or just, I'm going to step back now and let's see what happens in your system. So there are a number of elegant ways to negotiate that, but you need to be aware of that. And often you will have a cue. Sometimes client might not say that it's becoming uncomfortable because they want to be good girl, or they want to please you, or they don't know how to voice that. They don't know what's actually happening in them. So therefore, it's important to learn about anatomy and about structure and how to read the body. Because if body started to shift, to move, to the body language, it's very obvious for if you know how to read it. You definitely need to learn the skill to follow that, and then you see that's happening. Body is closing down, the breath is changing, diaphragm is responding. You can see the facial features are changing, and so on. The shoulders, the hands. There's so many signs that you can observe when the body response is positive or negative. To your contact, and therefore you negotiate that. You never allow this to progress on a deeper level.
An interesting quote from yesterday, listening to your podcast, was also, you said, okay, I don't know everything. And I say, if I don't know something, I say, well, I don't know. But when I, as a TRE provider, look at your work, I think I don't know anything. So we are really equipped very differently. I'm not a body worker or craniosacral therapist, and I also teach TRE. Sometimes I feel like I shouldn't. Just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, you honor and respect your own skills and your own capacity and ability, and then if you want to engage more, you do that, or if not. And I think in regards to working with clients, clients will be attracted to you. They will come to you for who you are, not necessarily, if you don't want to make contact, most clients unconsciously will feel that as well. But sometimes, that skill can be really useful. However, I would always, that's what, when I teach this work, I always say that I think most of us know how to touch people. If you were sexually involved with someone, or you held a baby, you know how to touch, which means you start respectfully and slowly and gently, and then verify and see if this is working or not. I think it's really unlikely that will create problem. If you ask for permission, you apply this softly and verify. Most of the 99.99% of the time that will go well. So that's my advice. And if you're not comfortable, then don't do it. Okay,
let's move forward. I assume if I would give you a choice, touch or verbal intervention, that you would choose touch. Is it correct?
Both. I think verbal interventions, yes. And that's what I think is a great skill in TRE. We got, first of all, ability to body to heal itself. So you engage with the mechanism that heals itself. Like TRE is you healing you, and then you have a verbal skill to communicate with someone. So that's called co-regulation. So you're giving someone safety, you're witnessing someone, you're holding space for someone, containment and co-regulating. Then you have further potentially touch, self-touch, touch, and that is really deepening and deepening our experience. I really insist on that because you are, in theory, we are giving fairly unique experiences and opportunities to many clients. And I'm going to add one thing before I forget, because it came up for me early on, and what I learned from this functional neuroanatomy, that there are different brain regions, and each, let's say, sensory cortex, for example, it's one of the first regions of the brain that develops, and is so important and huge to understand that. But within the sensory cortex, there are a number of regions also, and each region has 6 layers of depth. Yeah. So when you have an experience like frustration, you might be touching just one layer. Then you might have an experience of involuntary movements or spontaneous movements or some sensation, or memory, or so you might be really engaging in this deeper state. So this is why it's important to have a capacity to help people engage in different levels of deepening the experience, because you might be experiencing the same movements, same kind of a response, or even same emotion, but the intensity or depth of that experience might be very different. And that's why I love TRE, because it offered in my own process and working with others this level of depth that I didn't feel in so many other therapies. I hope that's explained the depth of these layers.
We were also going to that, not to death, but to depth, with your innovative workshop with, if you remember, 3 months it lasted, and was called 8 developmental stages with TRE. And that's why I asked you touch or verbal intervention, because we were on Zoom. You couldn't touch us. You could touch us just with certain words that I think were very important for each developmental stage we were talking about. And for me, it was really, really interesting process, how powerful the words are. And if you could just tell our audience a little about this, just maybe to motivate them to apply at your workshop.
Sure. Of course, I remember 8 developmental stages. I'm quite proud of that workshop, because I really I studied Erik Erikson, a long time ago, and I knew about the concept, but it stayed as a psychological tool where you discuss and understand some of these stages, which were spot on. I really find them very, very accurate. However, working with Gabor Mate in person, he always goes back to the developmental stages, and he helped me to actually, when he worked with me personally, he brought me to a particular point, and then some of my emotions that were quite challenging for me in my, few years ago, even today, he helped me identify, that was the root. And then I remembered Erikson, and then I said, why don't I combine this? So instead of being just mental concept, staying in the cognitive part, let me embody that. And that's how this whole idea came. And then I worked on myself with that, and then I done some tests with some other groups, and then responses were really, really good and strong and favorable. So I decided to start the course. And I'm going to be doing that course in April, actually, starting a new one. I do this once a year because it's quite full on in 4 months. And each time I teach this course, I go through my own process again. So like, and I've got a number of other courses going, and like, don't want to exhaust myself. I need to pace myself. So it's the course, 4 months, 16 weeks. where we're going to go through. It's 12 people only maximum, so it keeps the intimacy, because some of you, if you remember, opened up and shared really intimate things, and it's important for us to hold that field and encourage that. And then we're going to learn about not just Erik Erikson's, because I brought Freud, I brought many other teachings and some of my experiences and some of the works from ancient cultures, but it was all embodied. That, so guiding people through the process afterwards in the practical part. We revisited some of these characteristics, some of these virtues, some of these sensations and emotions, and felt them in a different way and embodied them. So thank you for reminding me. But I forgot about 8 stages, which is coming soon. So hopefully people will be interested. What I did actually, I started. I didn't send you that invite, but I started a conversations in depth with Cheda. So it's a monthly webinar, free webinar online, where I, people come online and we discuss particular subject. And actually, it was just on Saturday, and it was about 8 stages, because some people were inquiring, so what's this 8 stages about? So I described and I talked about, and I gave example of that. So idea, and it's free. And if you want, I send the link, and it will be on my YouTube channel as well.
I got that. Net invitation. It's not just the 8 developmental stages, but also TRE and primitive reflexes. That was interesting for me, because I have a newborn and I look at his primitive reflexes and I see, oh, he's doing TRE. It's pretty the same as I shake sometimes. And I listened to your conversation with, I don't know, with Norwegian TRE trainer, who is
Hans.
Yeah, Hans. So it also clicked me, oh, how deep can we go with this TRE? We can combine it with every aspect of our lives. So Cheda is doing that, and maybe the last topic we cover, I know you have some other topics, but please tell us, I have 2 questions. How is TRE connected with primitive reflexes? And your statement that some people feel TRE as revolutionary method, and some of them not really. And you linked this with primitive reflexes. How is that? And then we go to closure. Okay.
Okay. So primitive reflexes, again, it's been assumed in the pediatrician world, in medicine, that within 12 months they are completed. However, with this Professor Melillo, I heard some of his work, and he claims that 50% of all adults have retained primitive reflexes. And I watched again some of his work and other people's work, and I realized, gosh, this is what I'm expressing. So my diaphragmatic movement is this old Moreau reflex, because I've done my birth trauma pattern and so on, and I was in a life danger at birth, and there were a number of other post-birth challenges for me as well. And I realized I retained some of these reflexes, because when my body is touched in a particular way, I have a very strong reaction. You touch other people, they don't feel anything, So, I have particular emotions that are really strong. Other people have very different emotions. So, over the years, I was exploring this and working with thousands of people around the world. I often saw these things are coming up, and being adventurer and curious, and really know that I don't know, and I know very little, I learned from people who know more in different fields, and that is aligned with me. That's how I came across this, and I experimented, I worked, I studied, and I came to the conclusion that all of us are affected by primitive reflexes, because these are these early involuntary movements that start in utero. And there are videos on that you can see now how babies are formed. One of the main positions in utero, it's the lotus position or butterfly position in TRE that we have. That's how most of the time babies in utero develop. So it's only natural to actually sit in that position and be in that position. As a matter of fact, some of the early uterine trauma that some babies went through, the mothers were exposed to particular trauma and shock they received that. We see that by using some of the early positions, you actually you can complete and make really great therapeutic intervention by simply doing that and applying different movements and so on. So that kind of pushed me to study deeper, and also for me was an obvious transition that if the early movements are in the utero, and then when you're a baby you have this, and then when you do TRE, these involuntary movements, often you have memory of them, you don't, you have emotions, you don't, but there is a great similarity and overlap with some of these movements. And when I do TRE, I have no retained reflex, or some of the strong responses are not existent anymore. My sense of grounding is very different. My body, my whole state feels different. So clearly that changes, and that's how I came across this and developed more of this work. I'm still developing this work, and I'm really going to be bold and brave to many people say, oh, that's rubbish, that's really, you don't have proof of that, and there is plenty of proof. We got a lot of scientific papers that actually confirm that, and there are a lot of pediatricians now and other therapists that work with babies at 5, 6, 7 years of age, preschool and school children that suffer from, they can't put their feet together, Babinski reflex, you go asymmetric tonic reflex. There's so many reflexes that children and adults suffer from. So, and then logically also, think about this. Why people with Alzheimer's, with dementia, with some of these neurological disorders that appear later in life, why do they regress to the primitive reflexes? They also, which means they stay on this very deep, probably 6th level, very primitive, because more complex movements then form and they govern our life. But nothing, we never forget anything. It gets stored in a system somewhere. So to me, natural, but I have a deep knowledge and sensation within my body. I do know, even prior to my birth, all the memory is there, and I revisited that, and I expressed that and so on, and I've seen this for so many people. So how could the primitive reflexes, which are the base for the development of our brain, of our sensory apparatus, of our motor apparatus, our cognitive apparatus, all of that, how can it be that we don't engage with this? And so for me, it's really kind of a natural progression to engage, and I think I'm a little bit more mature now and wiser, and I think I have, because you do have to have capacity to combine different disciplines. It's not just about primitive reflexes and stroking particular part of the body or position. You need to have more brain science, hence I'm studying more, and we have this superpower which is called TRE that really helps, honestly, engage with some of these early spontaneous involuntary movements, and I think that's quite amazing. I hope I explained enough or well enough this.
Yeah, maybe just this statement that TRE for some people has a really big impact, and for some they say, oh, I don't feel difference. It's shaking. Yeah. Okay.
And I think to me it's related to some of these early stages and integration of these primitive reflexes, and also about the level of traumatic experiences we had in life. I think some of us traumatized people have a better response or stronger response, and people who didn't have some of these strong experiences, they're like, yeah, I'm fine, you know, it's just
that's why my husband doesn't like theory. He doesn't need it. He doesn't. Okay, he has a wife who does. So you came to a point where you just play with a body. It seems like that. Well, what would you say? Is it intuition, or is it all the knowledge, or maybe something else? When I look at you, it seems like you're just playing.
Okay, so yeah, I'm. Yeah, and actually, ultimate goal is to turn the therapy into a play, because often I see, particularly in the trauma world, we are very serious. So, and I learned from Berselli, he is very relaxed and cracks jokes and really softens the edges of some of our experiences. And that to me was magical. And he has this great skill, and I learned that skill. And within me, I do have that capacity. So, and the more I'm working with trauma, I'm actually moving towards that. If you want to be serious, you know, don't come to me, go somewhere else, you know. Because also there are a number of neurological reasons for this, which I will explain. But just to come back to that intuition. What is intuition? Intuition is inner tuition. So it's an inner knowledge that we all have, but some of that inner knowledge needs to develop. To me, it's not enough. Oh, you know, I feel that. Is this conditioned feeling or some desire, or you know, often people are not very clear and they go with the flow, and we know where the flow ends up in the gutter, in the sewage. So I think we need to live more intentionally, more consciously, and more playfully and in more accepting and relaxed way. So I do believe we develop our intuition, and the more knowledge you have of life, you have stronger intuition too. You have a greater skill, because I do believe in life. We live in this life to develop different skills, and that then translates into greater trust in your own knowledge and ability and capacity. So just to complete with the play, what we do know with the play, that you know, children, how do they grow up? Children, how do they develop? Movement and play. Before they start talking, they sing, they make sounds, the melody through that's more playful. Before they start to run, they roll, you know, it's kind of a more playful experience. And that engages the ventral vagal state, that engages sensory and motor and premotor cortex as well, that later on develops this orbito-prefrontal cortex as well. Then you got parietal lobes, then you got number of temporal lobes, that also, and insula and hypothalamus, that all engage in this amazing symphony of you know, maturing and creating different experiences. And if these experiences are more playful, you're more in a parasympathetic state, you're more receptive. But if, you know, if we are military and serious and sympathetic, which sometimes you have to be, I'm not saying, you know, you always need to be chilled and relaxed. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the more receptive you are, more playfully and more accepting, more fluid in life, you will, you know, be more successful, and successful in sense, life potentially will be easier. So that's why I do believe play is fundamental in many aspects of life, but in trauma as well, where you soften with the burden or the scar that you might have. in life, either emotional or physical, and so on. And I think that's where my own style is moving more towards that.
Well, you have a lot of projects. You said 8 stages coming up. Maybe a question for Slovenian audience. Are you coming in Slovenia? Maybe.
Slovenia, when Slovenia is ready, when there are enough people, I'll come in. No problem. Just give me notice. I'll be there. Actually, I'm going to be in Belgrade next month, and I'm teaching in Serbian the art and science of touch. It's 1-day workshop, so maybe I can do that in Slovenia at some point. So Serbian audience asked for that, so there is a nice group that's it was created. So, and art of touch, but also science of touch. So I like to combine both and teach obviously theory behind it, because I do like the theory, and I do believe we should understand the theory of some of this, and then practically work on ourselves and with others. So yeah, I've got that body reading in London in May. So I teach for people how to read the body as well. I think that's essential as a TRE provider or any therapist. If you know how to read the body, it really is helpful. Then I will have primitive reflexes again in London and online. I mean, they're all on hybrid courses in July. And for end of September, there is a psoas and pelvis, the one I've done in Slovenia already. So that's on and I started anatomy, TRE anatomy course. And I probably will repeat this in October, because many people wanted to do this course, but they couldn't. So 10-week course, and then I'll do that in October again, because there is a big number of people that want to do that. So that's me for the year, I think.
Yeah, great. Maybe just the last words for TRE instructors from Slovenia and our listeners, if you have some.
What to say? Keep going. I mean, it's a great exploration. Keep working on your own process, engage with others, and just be open. With some people, it might work more, with others less. With your own process, you might be more effective at sometimes, and others less. And so, just being more present with yours and other processes. And keep exploring. So it's a great tool that we have. Honestly, it's really, and I think in future people will understand more why involuntary spontaneous movement is so fundamental, because that's the base of who we are, and we have a great tool here.
Cheda, thank you for your time and your knowledge. Yeah, it was nice talking to you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, and yeah, good to see you after a long time. Yeah, so we hope to see you soon, and yeah, let me know. I'm here, whatever you need.
Okay, thank you.